Brazil is not running out of creative players. That is the strange part. Every generation, the country still produces attackers who can beat a defender, see a pass before it opens, create something from a moment that looks lost. But when Brazil looks for its next great number 10, the same question keeps returning. Where did that player go? Estêvão offers a useful clue. During his development at Palmeiras, he was not simply a winger. He was trained across the attack, on the right, on the left, and as a number 10. But as senior football approached, the clearest path opened somewhere else. On the right, near the touchline. A defender in front of him, space to accelerate into. From there, everything that made him special still worked. The close control, the imagination, the ability to eliminate a defender and create the next action. Nothing creative had disappeared. The talent had found its position. And that is where Brazil's search for the number 10 becomes more complicated. There was a time when the central creator occupied a very different place inside Brazilian football. Zico is useful here because he makes that older arrangement unusually clear. He was not merely a player with technique who happened to operate in the middle. The attack could pass through him repeatedly. He could receive between midfield and defense, combine near the area, arrive to score, take responsibility for dead balls, then appear again in the next movement asking for possession. The important thing was not the painted number on his shirt. It was the amount of football he was allowed to touch. A player like Zico required quality, obviously, but he also required access. The ball had to keep finding him. Teammates had to recognize his position as a place from which the next decision could be made. The team accepted a degree of concentration. Many attacking moves would pass through the same intelligence. That kind of authority became part of what Brazilians learned to recognize as the number 10. It was never one fixed tactical position. Brazilian football changed around Pelé, Rivaldo, Zico, and the players who followed them. Their movements were different. Their teams were different. But a certain relationship survived for a long time. The creator in the middle was given enough possession, enough freedom, and enough responsibility to leave his personality on the attack. That is much harder to separate from the memory of Brazilian football than the shirt itself. And even before the present generation, that relationship was already changing. Rivaldo looked different. He could create, certainly, but his football carried a stronger pull toward the goal. He moved into scoring positions. He attacked spaces. He could begin away from the center and arrive where the damage was being done. He did not have to stand in the middle of every attacking move to shape it. Kaká pushed that movement further. His most recognizable actions were often vertical. Receive, turn, cover ground. The space ahead of him mattered as much as the space around him. His authority could come from acceleration and timing rather than from repeatedly stopping in the same central pocket to conduct possession. Brazil had not suddenly abandoned playmaking. It was becoming harder to say exactly where the playmaker lived. Attackers were being asked to affect the game in more ways and from more places. Nobody had to declare the Brazilian number 10 obsolete. The game around him was already moving. Teams pressed higher. Transitions became faster. Space in central areas became more crowded and more aggressively defended. Attackers were expected to participate without the ball, move across positions, attack the space behind a defense, and remain useful even during long periods when possession did not pass through them. For a gifted young player, the wing made a lot of sense. There is a practical advantage to receiving near the touchline. The field itself removes one side of the pressure. A winger can face a defender, accelerate, combine, and enter the area without needing the entire attack to be organized around his touches. And if that player can press, run in transition, and change sides or positions, he fits more easily into different systems. A coach has options. The old central creator asks for something more specific. He needs the middle. He needs possession there often enough for his reading of the game to matter. and he needs a team prepared to let a large share of its attacking decisions run through him. That becomes harder when those decisions are spread across several players and several areas of the pitch. Neymar belongs to both versions of the role. Much of his club football taught people to see him as a player beginning from the left. He could receive near the line, face defenders, and move inside. For Brazil, though, the geography was often less important than the responsibility. The team kept looking for him. He dropped toward midfield, appeared between lines, drifted wide, came inside, took the ball under pressure, carried it forward, combined near the area, and tried the final pass himself. The shape around him could change, but his relationship with the ball sometimes felt older. Brazil could still place an unusual amount of creative responsibility in one player. That was one reason Neymar became so difficult to replace. Replacing his goals was only part of the problem. Replacing where attacks began, who accepted the difficult possession, who connected one phase to another, was harder. After him, the search for a new number 10 often became confused with a search for another Neymar. But Neymar himself showed how much the old role had already changed. He was not Zico transported into another era. His football belonged to modern, wide attacking spaces, as much as to the Brazilian tradition of central authority. He could start outside and still become the center of the attack. That combination is rare. And once Brazil could no longer rely on it, there was still plenty of attacking quality without an obvious player around whom the same degree of control could be concentrated. The current generation makes the change easier to see. Look at what its best young attackers are asked to do. They must beat defenders, certainly, but they also have to threaten depth, press, recover position, attack quickly after possession changes, receive in several zones, understand when to remain wide and when to enter the middle. None of this has stopped Brazil producing creative players. It has simply made the wing a very clear place to use them. A player who can dribble and accelerate is immediately valuable there. Add defensive work and positional flexibility, and his pathway becomes clearer still. He does not need the team to hand him the center before his talent becomes useful. That is why Estêvão's trajectory is so interesting. His development had already taken him across attacking positions. But development is also about where a player keeps getting trusted. A young attacker learns very quickly where his qualities make the most sense to coaches. Give a player Estêvão's close control, acceleration, and ability to eliminate a defender, and the right side becomes an obvious destination. He can receive with a clear opponent in front of him. He can attack the box. He can create without waiting for the whole team to reorganize itself around his position. That does not make him a failed number 10. The interesting part is that the creative ability can survive while the role around it changes. A player can have the technique. The authority still has to be built through the football around him. A central creator needs repetitions. He has to receive again and again in difficult areas. He has to learn which risks a team will allow him to take there. He has to discover how to manage possession when opponents begin designing their defensive behavior around stopping him. Eventually, that authority develops because the football keeps returning to him. Without those repetitions, the same technical gifts may develop differently. The dribble becomes a weapon for escaping pressure from wide areas. Acceleration becomes a way of attacking the defensive line. Combination play becomes part of quick exchanges around the box, rather than the basis of an entire attack. The creativity is still there. It is just doing a different job. This also helps explain why the conversation around Brazil can feel so strange. Whenever the national team struggles to create through the middle, the diagnosis quickly becomes cultural. Brazil does not make those players anymore. The country has lost creativity. Then another Brazilian winger appears at a major club, receives under pressure, eliminates his defender, and produces something technically difficult. The problem is that those two things keep getting treated as if they were the same. Creativity can live almost anywhere in an attack. A number 10 becomes an organizer only if the team keeps giving him enough of the ball to organize. The old number 10 needed a team willing to give him a great deal of the game. Modern attacks often spread those decisions around. One player holds width, another attacks the half space. A midfielder breaks forward. A fullback changes the passing angle. The center forward drops. Creation arrives through movement and combinations rather than waiting for one permanent organizer. That changes how an attacker proves his value. A gifted winger can influence a game even when he receives the ball relatively few times. One isolated duel may be enough. One run behind the defense may be enough. A central organizer needs the ball more often. He has to keep coming back into the game. That difference shapes what young players are asked to become, long before anyone starts wondering why Brazil no longer has a Zico. There is no obvious mistake to undo here. Brazil cannot recover an older football world merely by placing a talented player in the center and giving him a number 10 shirt. The game around that shirt has changed, and it makes little sense to look at Vinícius, Rodrygo, Raphinha, or Estêvão and treat their wide roles as some failure of Brazilian development. They became valuable because their football works there. The real question is why that route has become so much easier to complete. For a modern club, the answer is visible every weekend. Wide attackers can provide creativity without demanding control of the whole attack. They stretch defenses, they press fullbacks, they run behind, they can move across the front line. They can still decide actions without the team having to revolve around them. A traditional number 10 is harder to separate from the conditions that allow him to control matches. That is why the search often produces frustration. Brazil looks for the player, but part of what it is looking for no longer exists in quite the same form. There may still be young footballers with the touch, imagination, and courage associated with the old number 10. Some will begin in central positions. Some will move between them. Elite football will keep finding other jobs for those abilities. A player goes wide and discovers more room to face the game. He learns to attack at speed. He becomes useful without monopolizing possession. His creativity remains visible, perhaps even more visible, because it now arrives in situations the modern game produces repeatedly. Estêvão on the right may be the clearest image of what Brazilian attacking talent has become. The ball still reaches a young player with a defender in front of him. There is still the first touch, the feint, the possibility of doing something the defender has not prepared for. That part looks familiar. What has changed is where the game places him when the moment begins. For decades, Brazilian football learned to imagine creativity gathering in the center, with the attack taking its cues from one player. Now much of that creativity begins closer to the line, already moving. The abilities associated with the number 10 are still being produced. They just do not always end up becoming a number 10. And perhaps that is why the search has lasted so long. The player Brazil remembers was never only a collection of skills. He also occupied a kind of football space that had been prepared for him: possession, central territory, repeated decisions, permission to influence almost everything. The skills have proved remarkably durable. The space around them has not.